to the March 15th Winchester Planning Board meeting 2022. I hope you all enjoyed yesterday, which was Pi Day, and I missed Pi Day, so for those. So why don't we do a roll call? Let me go through, make sure so everyone knows who's here from the planning board. I'll just call out your name and, oh, I'm sorry, Brian, have you got, yes, Brian is recording. So everyone out there, you are being recorded on WinCam, I believe. Is WinCam with us this evening? Yes, WinCam is here and you are being recorded on Zoom. If you don't wish for your likeness or your voice to be recorded, please turn off your video and your microphone. So roll call, please. Sally Dale.
Present.
Kurt Spring.
Present.
Cheryl Wolf.
I'm here.
I Ching Scott.
Present.
And Diabjurius, I am present as well. We also have with us Brian Zucchelli, town planner. I'm sure Nancy is here somewhere. Is Nancy here?
Yes, she is.
Oh, thank you. I can't. Nancy Polcari, our recording secretary, is here as well. We are waiting on town council to help us.
Mina's here.
Yeah, Mina is here.
Excellent. So, Brian, if you would put up our, town council will lead us through the decision-making process we're going through this evening. So this is essentially Mina Markarios, town council, will describe to us what exactly are conditions that can be placed on the project. We will go, and that's going to happen in a couple seconds. We'll have time for Mina to answer questions. We will then go through the special permit criteria. Brian and town planner and town council have drawn up a list of mitigating conditions from what was discussed last week. The board will discuss that. We will then have a vote for approval or denial with or without prejudice of the special permit. We will then vote on the waivers. If it's approved, we will vote on the waivers, and then at that point, if it has been approved, we will go on to the site plan review. And again, town council will give us an indication of what the endorsement or withholding endorsement means for the project. Then we will go through the site plan review criteria. We will show the list of possible mitigating conditions, have a discussion, and then we will vote for endorsement or withholding the site plan. And then finally, if we get to this point, the board typically votes for the chair, the planner, and legal counsel to finalize the decision based upon the will of the board. So Mina, I'm going to turn this over to you right now, where you can tell us a little about the special permit process, what the conditions are, on what conditions are acceptable.
Thank you, Deanne. So for those of you who might be new to the process or haven't had the particular special permit process, the special permit conditions, or the special permit criteria are laid out in the bylaw itself. And Diab and Brian and I will sort of walk through those as we go. And you started walking through those the other night. Conditions on a project are, there's sort of two varieties that could be conditions and a third that shouldn't be conditions. The two varieties are reasonable sort of implementation steps to make some of the criteria where the applicant has shown that they will meet the criteria, but only if they do the following things that are implementation measures for the project as proposed. Those are reasonable conditions. So for instance, you have several in here that have been well vetted, have been around in various projects regarding coordination with the town manager and town engineer on parking, on traffic circulation, that kind of thing. Those issues are sort of your bread and butter conditions. There are also times when concerns have come up, especially during the course of a hearing like this one, where we've had multiple nights and a lot of testimony back and forth, where the applicant has said, I think we can meet this condition because we're doing something voluntarily, even though we don't need to, and you can hold us to that. And there's a handful of those, for instance, on the sustainability issues that go above and beyond, where if the board imposed them unilaterally, there may not be an issue, but we have heard from the applicant that they are willing to do them, and this sort of memorializes that commitment for them and future owners. It would kind of go with the land, not just with the folks in front of you. What is not a condition is a condition that changes what the project is. And that is not in the planning board's purview. The planning board could decide that a project does not meet criteria because of the way that it is framed or the way that it's designed. But for instance, and I'll just use a very specific one that has come up in this context, reducing the height of this building by a story. In order to implement that condition, in order for that to be accepted, that would require the applicant to revise your plans and be willing to do that. If you feel that without reducing the building by a story, the special permit criteria are not met, that would be perhaps, and I will get into why it's a perhaps, a reason for denial, but it wouldn't be a condition that this is granted as long as you make this significant modification that essentially changes the project in its entirety. So that's, as we went through with Brian, and I spoke with Brian over the weekend or right before the weekend, the kind of conditions that you have in front of you all are within the sort of realm of acceptable conditions. But I would just point out that distinction. Also keeping in mind that dimensional regulations, to the extent that they have been set in the CBD zoning itself and that the applicant has stayed within them and has complied with them, it is not considered by the courts a reasonable condition to either deny or to either condition or deny based on something that complies with zoning. So that's, as you go through, you have to decide, does this comply with the zoning as written, not necessarily the project as any one person might have chosen it, but as written by town meeting. And the conditions really are more implementation measures than changes. Diab, I hope that answers, I think, the preliminary question, but if others have questions, I'm happy to take them.
I think I would leave it to the board to decide whether that's answered their questions. Are there any board members who want to ask Amina some more clarification?
I guess I'd like clarification on what you were saying that the courts say. I didn't quite understand what you were saying about that.
Sure. So if a project is a project could be appealed by the applicant for two reasons. One, it's denied, or one, it's unreasonably conditioned. Those are the two arguments an applicant can make. It was wrongfully denied or it was unreasonably conditioned. And what the courts will look for is a little bit different in each. For the improperly or unreasonably denied, it will be looking at the factors de novo, meaning all fresh. It looks at all the factors on its own and says, does this meet the zoning criteria as set by the town's legislature, town meeting? And where there are specific dimensional regulations, if those are met, it is a court would have trouble upholding a denial. I think it would be unusual for a court to uphold a denial, I guess I would say. If dimensional criteria are met, if the denial is based on, yeah, but we think it could have been less use of the building envelope permitted by town meeting. So that's something just to be aware of. That's, if town meeting has set a building envelope that's allowed, the planning board can't rely on the size of the building as a reason to deny. It could rely on other factors that aren't met, perhaps, but not that. On the unreasonably conditioned, courts are watchful for, as a matter of protecting both applicants and town meetings intent, for conditions that try to do what basically rewrite the zoning in that way too, or look like a denial or act like a denial without being a denial. For instance, you can't make a condition that essentially changes the project that's before you in a fundamental way that then causes a court would look at that and say, that's not a condition because you're not implementing the project that was before you to meet to sort of be consistent with how you've interpreted the criteria. You are changing the project that came before you and saying, well, if it was that project, it would meet the criteria, but this one doesn't.
Right.
And so they treat that like a denial, I guess, is the point, Sally, and we'll treat it with the same level of review to make sure it was properly denied, not just conditioned. In other words, you can't call it a condition if it's really a basis for denial.
Right. That seems logical.
Mina, I had a question. What about?
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure who Mr. McGinnis is. He appears to be a potato. I don't know if you're being Zoom bombed is what I'm worried about. So.
Okay.
No, you're being Zoom explosive.
Mr. McGinnis has, well, I don't know what happened to him. Thank you.
I removed him.
Thank you.
Wow.
Sorry, Kurt. I didn't mean to get distracted by our new friend who was joining there.
I had missed the talking potatoes, so I'm glad you called that out. No, my quick question was like maybe it's not a quick question, but there are, I think, at least one place thinking explicitly in zoning bylaws where it seems to provide like flexibility, and almost makes it subjective. There aren't clear criteria, or it leaves it sort of at the will, I think, of the permit granting authority. So how are we to interpret what would be like a reasonable condition to satisfy something like that?
Kurt, that's a really good question. And the task before you is a bit harder than it might be for, if the criteria were, you basically take out measuring tape and figure it out that way. For those criteria, you need to be able to tie it to the factor itself and why that condition is going to further that factor. Where it's a little bit, where the rubber meets the road is sort of, and there can be room for argument, despite what I just said, an applicant might say, this is a fundamental change to my project. I can't possibly accept that condition. Where a planning board or town council or a court might actually say, no, that's just a way of implementing the issue. So to take, for example, if the proposal is, and I want to stay away from the current proposal, but if for this purpose, but if a proposal is to, well, actually I won't, then make it easier, to sort of make sure that there is adequate mitigation for light impacts, right? And you'll see in the draft conditions, for instance, following dark sky guidelines as a way to do that. That is a way to take the somewhat subjective criteria. You could see mitigate light impacts in different ways. And to say, okay, here's how we're going to measure that. We think if you meet these guidelines, that criteria will have been met. An applicant, in this case, the applicant has said that seems reasonable. So that's why I'm using that example. I don't think there's any dispute there. You could imagine, though, a different condition that says, applicant will ensure that in all deeds for all residential units, lights will be turned off anytime when the sun is down. This will be a sort of a pre-electric community because any light emission is too much. That would be an unreasonable condition. If you're zoning it for housing, that would be sort of going too far. It would also be unreasonable to say, shall not install any outdoor lights, which might be required by other laws or by other safety measures. So you sort of are defeating the point of the project, if you get my drift, through a condition. And that's where the courts really look, is how far down that spectrum are you? And that's, so you take the project as it comes, but there are some implementation measures you can condition it on.
Thank you. I had one more really quick question, which is, Mina, are you staying on for this whole meeting? Because if we have other like clarifying questions as we go through, I was just wondering if you're going to be on the entire time.
That's my plan, unless the chair kicks me off. I'll be here.
Mina, you would have to do something really outrageous to get to that point. So I think we're safe. So I want to are there any other further questions for Mina? I guess not. So I know that we were looking forward to hearing from the Sustainability Director on his revised report to the meeting. He will be with us at 7:30 this evening. And so he will have as we did with the other consultants last week, we'll have a chance to ask him about his conditions or his report. I think he is going to present a very short report as a follow-up to the earlier one, which was decreed to be a little out of date considering progress or things that had been going on with the project. So until then, we can return, I believe, to the special permit deliberations, and Ken Pruitt, our sustainability director.
Yeah, he's actually just getting, I'm letting him in at the moment. So I don't know. Yeah.
We could just go directly with Ken, and then that would make sense. And then after that, we could go through our deliberations. Ken, are you ready to go?
Oh, actually, I had to, because of that, I had to lock the meeting down. So let me just, I'll give him, so now Ken should be able to unmute whenever he's ready.
Okay, I just did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so Ken, if you want to identify yourself and go ahead.
Yep. Hi, I'm Ken Pruitt, Winchester's Sustainability Director, and I'm happy to be here tonight. I just joined, so I wasn't privy to whatever was said just before I joined.
We were just going over the rules of the road. So
okay, great.
So we are ready for your. You had a short presentation to make, and then we were going to open it up to questions from the board. Are you ready now to do that?
Yeah, I just had a very short comment actually to make, which was that over the last few months, the applicant worked voluntarily with me, both in a couple of meetings and via email, to address some concerns I had raised and that I had sent to this board regarding the town's climate commitments as stated in the 2020 Climate Action Plan, and whether this development could be designed in such a way as to be consistent with that climate commitment. And primarily what I asked for was for the building to be as all electric or as close to that as possible. So zero on-site combustion of fossil fuels, to have solar power, EV charging stations. I believe those were the primary asks. And the applicant was actually quite willing to engage in those conversations. And I'm happy to say the current design and agreement from the developer is to have all heating and cooling to be via fully electric heat pumps, for all cooking appliances to be wired for, and any that are installed to also be fully electric, not gas. For the roof to be pre-wired for solar PV, not just pre-wired, but also designed to accommodate PV in the future. and for electric vehicle charging stations to be incorporated in the automatic parking system. It's not exactly like having one charging station per parking space in a parking lot or garage, because they have this unique automated parking system that should be able to charge certainly all the electric vehicles that are likely to be there in the beginning. And they've pledged that over time, if demand exceeds the initial charging capacity, that they would add additional capacity. So again, all of these things were voluntarily agreed to, and they are, again, consistent with the town's climate action plan. And I think it's important to recognize developers who are willing to make that kind of voluntary commitment. So that's really all I had to say on the subject, although I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks. I am having difficulty seeing everyone on the board. So if you want to just shout out, if you want to say
I have
something.
a question.
Oh, go ahead, Adrian.
Ken, thanks so much. I was wondering if there was consideration about the building envelope, about sort of any sort of R ratings or glass and its reflection, things like that. I wonder if there's any talk about that.
Yes, there in fact was, and thanks for reminding me, because that was one of the items that I listed early in the conversation with the developer, which was to make the building as energy efficient as possible. And they have pledged to make the building highly energy efficient. We didn't agree upon any specific R value or HERS rating. And they certainly did not pledge to achieve the highest standard, which is passive house. But in order for electric heat pumps to simply be able to heat and cool the entire building, it has to be made highly efficient. And they've pledged to make it, extremely efficient. We didn't arrive at a specific metric for that, but I take them at their word.
Ken, I was wondering, I know that we have, there are minimum specifications in the zoning bylaws for environmental impact and sustainability. Can you just, I know a lot of people out, we've received a number of comments about how this compares to Waterfield. Can you give us a really brief overview of what is in the zoning bylaw, the minimum that they would be reaching for?
Yeah, I believe that the minimum, and someone, perhaps anyone else on the board or Mr. Zacchelli, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only requirement is to achieve a certain LEED level, which would be LEED silver. I'm getting a thumbs up from Brian, so I think I got that right. So within zoning, the requirements are not extensive. I think it's just that LEED requirement, which is substantial. It's not as high as going as LEED gold or certainly platinum, but it's certainly substantial. And so obviously the developer would have to meet that standard. As regards the Waterfield proposal, I honestly can't remember exactly what the provisions were there. I think Waterfield was also all electric heating and cooling. I think it might have been an entirely all electric building, although what I'm not sure about is domestic hot water, which is very difficult to provide through an all electric source for buildings above 10,000 square feet. So I suspect that would not have been the case for Waterfield. I think Waterfield also had solar. I know Waterfield, at least the original accepted proposal, was a highly sustainable building. I just can't remember off the top of my head what all the requirements were, all the provisions were.
Okay, thank you.
Ken, did the applicant indicate though whether or not they were potentially going to try and achieve higher than a LEED silver certification for this building?
They I'm trying to recall if it even came up. I know we discussed that they obviously understood they had to at least achieve silver. Gold is difficult to achieve, and it does encompass a number of metrics other than just energy and climate. It has, indoor air quality, bike racks, some of the materials that they use, and these were not as directly important in terms of the town's climate action plan. So I didn't focus on them as much with the developer. They may go for LEED Gold, but I don't recall them stating that they would. So my assumption is they wouldn't attempt to get to that level. But I won't speak for the development team.
Okay, any other questions for Ken? And I can see everyone but Cheryl. So Cheryl, if you are shaking your head, I can't see it.
No, no more questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I wish there were a way of ordering people so that I could see the board. Okay, thank you, Ken. I think in that case, we will move on to where we left off, which was in the special permit review. And Brian, if you could pop those up, please. We had just finished, I believe, number 4 in the list of criteria. And so last week, I went in reverse alphabetical order, and it was pointed out to me that if I went in reverse or forward alphabetical order, some people would never get to the head of the line. So today we are going to do it randomly. And so today is, I just wrote a little program. We have I Ching first, Cheryl, Sally, Diab, and Kurt. So that is how we will move through this. So we are now at number 5, adequacy of proposed screening and buffering. In particular, I believe this corresponds to the buffering of equipment on top. I don't know if there's anything else on this site which has a requirement for that. So why don't we start, and if everyone could keep their comments to a minute or so, that would be excellent. So I Ching, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. From what I understand, one of the conditions that was set forth was to come back and determine the adequacy of the screening of the top equipment. And I recall David Hassine saying that he's very conscious of it in all his projects. And I think that's sufficient. That we get to look at it again and try to work with them to make it less obvious that there is equipment up there.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl?
Yeah, I think I think the height of the building is certainly from downtown is going to protect the view, but I do think that if you were over at Lincoln School or other higher vantage points, you probably would have, we would have a problem with looking at the equipment. So I'm with I Ching. I think we should make the condition that it's, that needs to be studied and looked at, that the materials and the extent of screening is adequate based on possible vantage points or views from the town. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Sally?
Following on Cheryl's comment, I agree that when you view this building from the surrounding higher elevations, which the town is essentially in a valley because it's on a river, it will always be obvious what is on the roof of this building unless there's some really careful and deliberative screening. And so that would be a requirement that we haven't seen yet. And then I want to ask a follow-on question related to that, which is, I think it's great that we're going to make a provision and a location for rooftop solar. And that adds another element of mechanical stuff to the roof. And that would also presumably be required to be properly screened and buffered. And it's a very high building in a valley, and it will be visible from not just the streets. And so I am just wondering how that will happen, and it's not yet been demonstrated.
Okay, thank you, Sally. So I'm going to continue in the same vein. I think that the proponent has indicated or has shown a sensitivity to what's happening on the roof. And I know in the original plans, they had looked at perhaps putting them in some sort of a well, the mechanicals, in order to completely prevent them from being seen. I think that there is a condition so that it's a viable condition is to minimize the appearance, especially from the higher elevations around there. I agree that from the street view near the building, you won't see it, but it is, it will be visible from above. So that's all I have to say. Kurt.
Yeah, I think everyone covered it. I'm glad Sally brought up the solar panels. So I did notice that in the proposed conditions. I think that's an important thing to just add to the mix in terms of what's going to be visible on the rooftop. And I think in Philip Chen's recommendations, he also mentioned the possibility of installing mechanicals at a lower elevation. And so I just want to add that into the mix as a possible, discussion topic as we try and find a solution for how to minimize the visual impact. But just to be clear, I think what I'm hearing is like we're all agreeing there's a condition precedent that we would add that would be subject to further study and sort of evaluation and approval of whatever the proposed rooftop screening is. Is that right?
I think that's the understanding. That's my understanding of what the board has said. So yeah.
Okay, great.
If I have just a follow-on question, the language says adequacy of proposed screening and buffering, and it doesn't specify rooftop. And so presumably it would include other things that have already been addressed, like the garbage is inside the building and stuff like that. Is it meant to cover more than just the rooftop?
It's meant to cover everything.
So, okay, it's pretty hard to screen and buffer a building this tall. So I'm not sure how that would apply to this building, but.
I don't think this is supposed to address that. I think this is screening and buffering from things like parking, utilities, things of that nature, which are, but it certainly doesn't relate to mass. So
it's like back of house type activities, or should be screened and buffered.
Well, and parking as well. I mean,
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
So,
thank you.
Yep. Okay. So I think at this point we can move on to number 6. Impacts on the natural environment, including but not limited to changes in topography, installation of retaining walls, or the removal of mature trees. And so I Ching, if you want to lead us off on that.
Yeah, sure. I think that Ken's testimony or memo speaks to that a little bit too. I think that I'm reading it as from a broader perspective, but that the building is trying to also figure out how to coexist with our environmental concerns. And I lean on a couple of the other committees to speak on that too. But the Aberjona initiative that they are committing to help with, I think is a positive in taking out the invasives and considering that strip between the property and the river and caring for that. I also think that the protection of the willow, I think they wanted to be committed to protecting it. And so I think I don't know if that was one of the conditions, but I only think that that entrance to the base of the river, that whole landscape scheme was also sort of undeveloped, and it would be nice to. I mean, it seems like a nice idea, but I think that they're all positives here.
Okay, thank you. I think I should note that the willow tree is on town property, so they had better protect it. So next up, Cheryl.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, thank you. Sally.
The most obvious environmental impact would be any impacts on the water quality of the river. And I know that Beals Engineering has done a huge amount of work to design a system that picks up stormwater drainage. And hopefully that fully mitigates that concern. And I, as I Ching mentioned, I would leave it to town departments and other boards to confirm that that is truly being taken care of, because I, as a planning board member, don't know how to tell if that's true. I would rely on experts. I would second or fourth, whatever, the idea of protecting the existing trees, large trees along the banks. And it's both the willow and also the pines that are close to the Mount Vernon Street Bridge. Those pines serve a very important screening purpose right now when you view the property from the northeast. And I would really advocate for, well, and I have done this before, and it's in the draft conditions that Brian created, for absolutely top of the line tree protection for those existing large trees. That's what I have.
Okay, thank you, Sally. So I would note that, so the Concom's peer review report came out today, and one of the things they did note was that there was a removal of a mature tree. I think that, I don't know where that is. That's certainly a concern of mine, but that should be, and hopefully will be, remediated. It's a tree greater than 6 inches, so I'm not sure which tree would be removed. I think that we are looking at a project which will increase the impermeable area just through the size of the building. Will that impact the natural environment? Well, they are required to put in appropriate drainage. Sally has spoken to that, also to the impact on water quality. There isn't much of a change in topography. It's a pretty flat lot. I think the natural environment does include things like our view of the river, our view of the pond, rather. And one of the questions I asked myself is, how does this building impact that? And what would the impact be if there were a by right building that placed on this lot? And would it have a different impact on the view? Because that is actually one of the things, is a developer could come in here and by right put a wide building, which would also include views of the river. I don't think that this is any worse of an impact than a by right project in terms of a street level view of the river. I think that the creation of a public area by the pond, I think it improves the natural environment. It removes the existing large building there. And when I think of natural environment, I think of the river bank, not necessarily the green sward up front. So I think this does have a net positive impact, or at the very least, a minimal, or I would say, I don't think it has a negative impact. I think it has a small net positive impact at the very least. Next, Kurt.
Yeah, Dia, I think you brought up a really great point, which is this idea of understanding what a by right alternative looks like, which would involve presumably losing all of the green space that currently exists, preserving the existing building and the existing parking lot. So I think, as you point out, I frankly think what's being proposed is better than that alternative. I think the current Mill Pond building, I think, sits closer to the pond, and actually between that and the driveway to the parking lot serves as almost like it detracts from the natural environment and decreases access for the town to that space. So I think actually what they're proposing is an enhancement there. I think you sort of touched upon it, but I just wanted to accentuate it because I think it's a really important point that hasn't come up, that it's important to think about. I think some public comments have almost implied that the green space is existing public space. And to be clear, it's not, it's private property. And so I think it's important to note that there's no preservation, no conservation, the town doesn't own it. So I mean, I think we have to think about it in that context. And I did just want to quickly second Sally's comment about the pine trees also being important. I think all those mature trees are important. They should be protected as part of that condition. That's all.
Okay, thank you. We're now on to number 7, and I know that this has not been, we've not had much of a discussion on the fiscal impacts. So I think I don't have any guidance to give the board on this in terms of how to proceed, since it really hasn't been a major part of our discussion.
I can quickly go then.
Yeah, go right ahead, Ichi.
All right. Well, I think that just basically the tax base, I mean, there will be more property taxes for the town, contributing to that. And town services, you know, I would hope, I think, I don't know, I would have to depend on other committees and other town employees to consultants to understand that. Employment, again, you know, I think that there'll probably be employment in building of the building. I don't know if it's going to be town-based, but you know, just bringing that many people into town, I think would increase any sort of need for services, and therefore maybe jobs. But again, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Cheryl.
Yeah, I'm kind of with I Ching on this one. I don't think that we, other than impact on schools potentially, with this being, you know, residential, but I don't think that, I don't think it's really clear in my mind, the fiscal impacts, other than it is providing a mixed use building. So there will be opportunities for businesses at the base of the building. And then there will be opportunities for people to stay in Winchester if they're no longer in a home. And I think they're all positives to the opposite of that, which is just open green space or office building that it is today.
Okay, thank you. Sally.
So I would say, with regards to town services, just following the language of the code, the burden on the services, which is schools and roads and public safety and parks, that burden is incurred wherever you add new housing in town. So regardless of how many or how few units, and on this site or any site, there's always an impact on town services for any development. So I'm not sure how we could rate that as a negative or a positive. It's a fact. With regards to the tax base, this would provide additional real estate tax to the town. And aside from the construction jobs, which would not necessarily be local, it depends where the contractor that is selected draws his people from. But the only jobs that I would see would be created by this building are retail, or I should say commercial space jobs in the 2.5 thousand or 2,500 square feet of commercial space. And possibly if there is a requirement for 24/7 attendance for the robotic parking garage. So I think it's probably a net positive fiscal impact for the town, whatever we put on that site.
Okay, thank you, Sally. I'm up next. I concur with what everyone else has already said. I think that the unknown, of course, is the type of households that move into this building. We don't know. There's a mix of units. We hope that some of those are going to be taken up, as was previously said, by people who are looking to downsize. And by providing a way for them to stay into town, they can provide revenue to the town. But as Sally pointed out, it doesn't matter where you put housing in town, it's going to have a net impact. I think that the biggest positive on this is the fact that it's located downtown and it will drive traffic to our local businesses. So when I think of employment, I think of the impact it'll have on existing businesses. There probably won't be an awful lot of new jobs in this location, but certainly 43 units will add, probably 100 people to, I'm just guessing, multiply by 2 and add a few, to 24/7 residency downtown, which can only be a positive, have a positive impact. So I think it's probably a positive impact, but not knowing what the mix of households, but that's an unknown anywhere. So that's my thoughts. Kurt, please.
Yeah, the beauty of going last is that all of my fellow board members managed to capture everything before it comes to me. So I don't have anything to add other than my recollection is one of the first meetings I attended was, I think, the head of the Chamber of Commerce came on, I think, at some point and endorsed the project and really was speaking to like the desire to get more vibrancy and more residences downtown to really fuel the local, sort of like the local economy and the local economic vitality downtown. So my recollection is the Chamber was supportive for that reason. So that would just be another potential check in this column, that this is probably a net positive for town.
Okay, thank you. So number 8 is impacts on historic resources. Brian, would you mind switching over to section 10 so we just have a brief overview of what those are? Section 10, by the way, is just.
All right. Yeah,
you got
rather
it?
than well, I had to didn't want to give everyone a headache scrolling. So
I appreciate that. So section 10 is the list of definitions in our town bylaws. So this is pretty short. So if you could take your little search widget out of the way there, Brian. Thank you. So we have heard from the Historical Commission on this particular one, but now it's time for the board to weigh in. So why don't we start with I Ching?
Yeah, I appreciated Historical Commission's memo about it, and from my recollection, it was very positive. That this it did not present a negative effect on historic resources. I think that I talked about style before, the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, and method of construction. And as a result of not developing for multiple decades downtown, I think that if we were to build in contemporary way, it would show. It would. I think that this building is addressing some contemporary issues like housing and climate change, and economic forces that make it so that it's fastest to, or not fastest, but best way to build. So I think that it will be a part of history in that it is addressing what we're doing now, what we're being confronted with now. So, it will be very contemporary. I think that's, I don't know if that addresses that.
Okay. Thank you. Cheryl?
Yeah, I also acknowledge that the Historic Commission has given this building or this project a high pass. And I think they commented on the use of materials, just the high quality of the design. And I know that we have a long way to go with detailing, and we have a very adept design consultant on board to get through the many phases of developing the design. He's someone who works with historic preservation and very sophisticated design in the Boston and Massachusetts area. So I think that we have a great team to bring the design through and to really respect the fabric of our existing town, both through materials and also through creating a streetscape, a real downtown kind of feeling. Completing the Mount Vernon street, also having a more residential feel along the water's edge, and also being able to deal with the challenges of Congress Street. So I think that its footprint has been challenging, but in a way, the way that downtown has created its infill and its grid, I think it really supports the character of the town in its design. So I think it will complement the historic buildings of downtown, as well as the layout of how town works. It will be a lot more of it'll have more of a relationship to town hall and to the rest of the buildings than a glass and steel tower with a big piece of empty grass in front of it. So I think that in terms of historic resources, I think it will someday become a historic resource.
Okay, thank you. Sally?
So I don't think that the building as it is currently massed does not have a negative impact on historic resources. I do think that the building is out of scale with the nearby historic buildings. I think that its mass needs to be broken into distinct volumes, which is one of our design standards. And that in its current configuration as a large rectangle, it's a monolithic mass that dominates and does not it's not consonant with, it doesn't positively blend with our existing natural resources in the town. I do think that the exterior of the building, in terms of its design, it's come a long way in the 2 years that it has been in presentations to the town. I think it has a ways to go in terms of its breaking up of the massing, reducing of the height. I'm not sure that the footprint has a negative impact on historic resources as much as it has a negative impact on natural resources. But I definitely think that the massing of the building and the height of the building do have a negative impact on our historic resources. And so in that regard, I don't agree with the decision of the majority of the Historical Commission. And I believe that I concur with their minority vote, or their minority opinion, I should say. And that's what I have.
Okay, thank you. So my understanding is the closest historic building to this one perhaps is the laundry building, because I believe the laundry building has been around since the 30s at the very least. So I think what I'm trying to say is that there are a number of different historic styles downtown. I think certainly no one would claim the laundry building is exemplary of what we would consider a historic building that we want to save. I think across the street, I'm looking at that site. So I'm looking at Town Hall. I'm looking at the Northmark Bank across the street. We have down the street, we have the Brown and Stanton building. We also have the building that's on Mount Vernon, right at the Rotary, whose name I forget. I think it was the former town hall many, many years ago. One of the things that stood out for me, not just in this proposal, but it also in the proposals for Waterfield, is that when each of the designers came and presented to the board their concept of what was the architectural or historical architectural image of downtown, they brought up so many different styles that you could not put your finger on a single style and say, this is what Winchester's downtown looks like. There were a number of them. And so when I'm trying to understand the impact on historic resources, in particular, the buildings around it and whether the design works or doesn't work with that, I looked at what's the distance between this building and the other structures. So we have the distance between this and the bank across the street, the public safety building, which is kind of a mix between old and new. The building right next to the public safety building is another, I think is a 3 or 4, probably 3-story warehouse-like building. Has the same sort of massing as the existing laundry building, but on a smaller scale. And across the river, you have Town Hall. And is this building close enough to any of those to impact them? Now, I think if they were right next to one of them, yeah, it would have an impact. I think there's enough distance between them that they are not, that they still can stand within their own context. And again, these contexts are varied because each of those buildings stands next to other buildings which are stylistically different. So I'm speaking too long, I apologize. So when I look at historic context and I look at how it fits in with the style of downtown, I think as people have pointed out, this will be the largest building that we have downtown. I don't think that's the 800-pound elephant or gorilla. But I think that its location on this lot, which is separate from other lots, and its use of material, which I think mirrors the thing which most of the designs for Waterfield and including this one it's the brick, which is, and the intricacy of the design. I think it fits in with a context of all of the different styles and designs that are downtown. So those are my rather long thoughts on that. My apologies. Kurt, please.
Yeah, I would say I would first lead off with similar to, I think, I Ching and Cheryl, deferring to the Historic Commission's, high marks for this development and sort of approval of it. I think they're, very focused on this, and I trust their judgment and experience on that front. I think it sounds like this is the discussions is like conflating a little bit. I think mass and historic resources, which I think starts to get tricky, especially with this project. But I think our design consultant gave it high marks for how it develops and fits in within the existing structure. The structure's downtown, and so I also rely on our design consultant for his guidance, and I personally think it also does. A lot of the materials and a lot of the design elements I think do tie in with the existing historic structures in a way that provides some amount of harmony. And the last thing I'll say is that I do think the design guidelines also talk about how development should be integrated to complement and harmonize with adjacent land uses planned or existing. And so I think it's important to think about this in the context of Winchester going forward and what the zoning allows for that entire area downtown, because it's likely to change over time. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Brian, would you be so kind as to put up our agenda, or the thing we put up at the beginning, so we can look at where we are in our process this evening? Okay. So we have just concluded number 2, which is going over the special permit criteria. And then we are going to be going over a list of possible mitigating conditions. And the idea here is after we go over this, someone will hopefully make a motion to approve or to deny with or without prejudice. And we'll have, hopefully Mina will be able to give us a quick explanation of what that means when we get to that point. So we're going to be looking at a list of mitigating conditions. Brian, if you would please put those up.
Sure. So the only changes that were from the ones that were in the packet, there are 2 red boxes on this document. There was a note in the version in the packet that just referred to the guidelines, and now the guidelines are in there. And then I just want to mention that the one other and then I'll stop just to show the difference between what's in the packet and what's on the screen. The other is something from the fire department that is asking for a fair share contribution to study the potential signals or other enhancements that are right outside the fire safety building to make sure that specifically vehicles, but also the firemen and women who are out there in the street directing the truck into the public safety building, is for their safety as well. These are the 2 changes from the ones in your document. That's it. Diab, I'll go back to the beginning now.
Okay, thank you. So this is a fairly long list. There are 20 some items. These are all, I hope there are no surprises in here for the board. These were all drawn up by Brian, our town planner, as well as Mina Makarios, our town council, to make sure that they fit in with, and as Mina presented at the beginning, what an actual condition might be. So I'm going to, if the board has any has any concerns about these conditions, or is there anything missing? Is there anything unclear about them? I know we haven't had a chance to discuss them, but I believe they should all be very familiar. And just pipe up, because I seem to have lost all of your faces again.
Yeah, I can jump in. I had a couple questions. On number 16, when it talks about the associated parking, it says shall be assigned with each unit, but may be rented to others. I guess that wasn't totally how I understood the idea. I think of like decoupling that the tool described. I got the impression that the idea was like the parking would be sold sort of like separately, if you will. I mean, made available to unit owners to purchase, but wouldn't necessarily be paired with the units specifically. But perhaps I just misunderstood that. So I was just asking for clarification, I guess, on the parking decoupling concept that tool outlined.
I could answer that. So the word unbundled from Tool's perspective and an industry standard is basically just that, how whatever spots are if you're not using your parking space, there will be there's a parking space deeded to the unit. If you don't have a car or don't want to use it, you can sell it to another person in the building. So it would be, so if someone has an extra car or wants another car, so that you would be able to do that. That's what unbundled means.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. I'll just jump to one other question while I have the floor here. On number 4, where it talks about the affordable units, and at the risk of sort of going back in our special permit criteria to perhaps number 1, is there, and maybe this is a question for Mina, I mean, would it be considered a reasonable condition or something that the board could consider trying to make a condition to have the 2 120% AMI units instead also be 80% AMI units and therefore qualify in the town's affordable housing listing?
So I would defer to Mina on that one. So just so I'm clear of the question, you're saying that, so the requirement is 10% be deed restricted affordable at 80 and below. That's what the,
yep.
And then there's 5% that's 80 to 120 that's actually in control of the town. And you're saying, can the town just do 80%? So we basically make those 2 count as well, because presently the 80 to 120 doesn't count.
I think that is the question, and I didn't know whether or not that strictly falls under the purview of the town, or if the developer would have to also, agree to that. Because maybe it doesn't impact the ultimate sales price. I don't know if the sales price is at all tied to your income relative to AMI.
Yeah, that's more of the power. Yeah, the power of the town to restrict those units that are at the moment between 8. They have to be between 80 and 120. Can we just restrict them just to 80?
I just want to be looking at the bylaw language at the same time, Brian, or the guidelines there, which as Brian will bring up, Kurt, I think that if they say there is that flexibility, I think this would be, I don't want to say categorically no, but it certainly runs a risk of being an impermissible condition because the guidelines have that range.
Okay.
And they've come in with that project, and it would be a pretty fundamental change to the project. It would typically change somewhat significantly the financing and a lot of other aspects of a project to change to units like that. But.
Yeah, no, I'm aware. I'm just thinking, I know some of the public comments too have been that, providing does the one question that I'm sure we'll get to as we get to the PUD discussion, I mean, is whether or not the number of providing like the bare minimum number of affordable units, whether or not that is, adequate to justify the additional FAR being requested. And I'm wondering if, trying to get something in excess of the minimum, which I think has come out of public comment, would help, the board justify granting additional FAR.
Yeah, I think this language, just looking at it again, I can, confirm my memory of it is that it is specific enough that I do think you would have a risk that that would be an unreasonable condition, absent some agreement from the applicant they're willing to do it. Okay.
Thank you. And last, promise I'll let everyone else talk. Last real quick question on this is, do we need to specify that the affordable units will also convey with, like those units will convey with a parking space? I don't know if that's addressed. I would just want to make sure that those affordable units also get a parking space and that those for some reason aren't only sold to market rate units or included with market rate units.
They have to be provided the same.
They do, okay.
Per DHCD guidelines, yeah, standards, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Would someone else like to have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Sally.
So I went through these and have notes on just a few of them. One thing that is a fairly minor thing, but it says that structural soils will be installed under the sidewalk and large, broad shade trees should be used and approved by the Design Review Committee and the Department of Public Works. And Also, we already alluded to this, a final landscaping plan needs to be reviewed and approved by the town. The only question I have about structural soil is a lot of times street trees are planted in very small tree pits with nice soil, which they quickly fill up with roots. And then they try to eke a survival out of surrounding structural soil. And I would much rather see a specification here that says that a more aggressive environment for tree health would be incorporated into the site work for the job. And I would defer to urban tree health experts to recommend to the planning board what would be the best and highest provision for trees. Trees in Winchester are dying. Street trees in Winchester are dying all over the place. And even new trees die. Some of the trees at the high school have died. So I would say that structural soils might be installed under a sidewalk, but the main thing would be that the trees should be planted with plenty of root room for survival in optimal soil conditions. And I don't know how you balance that with sidewalks not subsiding, et cetera, but I know that it can be done. I just don't know the practices. So that was my first comment. And then my second comment was going back to what Kurt was talking about. I would like to see that that 2 of the affordable units be made available to 60% AMI. That would be more than what is requested by the town. And in my mind, doing more than what is requested by the town is, it's a good thing to do. To do the bare minimum is to do just that. And I think the needs of the town are addressed when you do more in the arena of affordable housing, including lowering the maximum income threshold for at least 2 of the units. So that was my second comment. And then another comment that I had, I can find it. On this parking thing, I was really confused about this statement number 16. I did not think that this constituted decoupling. I thought what decoupling meant was that the parking spaces could first be sold to the purchasers of the condominium units. There's 43 units and 56 spaces, which means that some of the condominium owners might choose to buy 2 parking spaces. I know that at least 3 of the parking spaces would need to convey with the commercial spaces because they are required to provide 3 parking spaces, to add 3 parking spaces to the town for their commercial spaces. And with regards to the purchase price to the residents of the affordable units, I'm not sure about this, and I would defer to our Housing Partnership Board and lawyers, but it seems to me that if they did purchase them, they would purchase them at a comparable or prorated percentage of the full price of a purchased parking space, comparable to the benefit they received associated with their affordable housing purchase price. So but again, it was all decoupled. So people would have the choice of doing this or not, right? And then when apartments change hands, they see what parking spaces have come up for availability. So it's basically, it's a separate marketplace within that structure. And it definitely should be provided preferentially to the affordable housing residents. So that's another comment that I had. And then I had a question about number 19, this question about sight lines. Let's see. Oh, so this is, I guess it's the second little dash where it says, do not restrict sight lines. And I guess my question is this driving sightlines, or is it pedestrian sightlines, or both? That's just a question I had.
I believe when it comes to all of this, that tool design would be looking at bikes, pedestrians, and cars.
Good. Okay. Well, that would be a good thing to do. Because sightlines are a problem around town in various places because of shrubs and whatever. We all managed to stay alive. With regards to number 21, we have already noted that the landscape plan for the site is still to be settled upon. I still have not seen something that I asked for before earlier, maybe even as far back as October, which is a really like a CAD drawing that shows the exact area of the precise open spaces that are being used to calculate the percentage of open space on the site, mindful that the zoning bylaw includes in two separate places presumably it's additive, not contradictory definitions of open space. One is that that it not include wetland buffer land, and the other is that it not include any pieces of land that are smaller than 15 feet across. So you wouldn't count like the inside of a little tiny triangle that if it's less than 15. So, but my point is that I haven't seen those precise calculations, and I would really like to know what they are. And ideally, I would like to see 20% open space on the site, but I understand that without having actual data, I don't know how close we are to that. And then with regards to the next point under 21, pedestrian circulation, it says that there should be sufficient space to accommodate proposed uses on the east side of the site. That proposed use on the east side of the site is primarily the multi-purpose bike path, also known as the Tri-Community Bikeway. And the goal for me would be that that bikeway would be widened to the currently defined optimal width for a bikeway.
Just to cut in there shortly, that's
there it
in
is.
there.
Okay, I'm glad to see that. If it can't be done on that side, then that would be a condition that would not be met, and I would move to a different phase of our conversation.
I think this condition requires that they do that, Sally.
Okay, and also preserves the willow tree, which was
the willow tree is on town property, so they have to keep it. They can't touch it.
Correct. And then another comment that I had, I already brought up, which was that does the current roof plan accommodate future installation of the solar panels? And then with regards to the parking garage, providing as many parking spaces as practicable, pre-wired for electric vehicle charging stations, we would need a mechanical, electrical, parking design, robotic parking design expert to verify what the maximum possible number of charging stations is. Conceivably, every single one of those little movable trays could be wired for that, and that would be 100%, and I just don't know. So that's the question that remains unanswered. And then that's how far I got with that.
Okay.
Diab, I don't know if, but Ken Pruitt, the sustainability director, has some information about the vehicle charging station that just got some information. Ken.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? And I'm trying to find, I'm pretty sure I saw a drawing from the applicant which showed their open space and it drew it on the ground in green, along with a accounting of how they got there. So while I'm looking for that, please go ahead, Ken.
Thank you. Just briefly on the charging stations. So this being kind of a high-tech parking and charging solution, essentially my understanding from the proponent is that 100% of the parking, the movable robotic parking pads will actually have charging pre-wired. It will have a charging cable available. And then down in the garage itself, the parking area will start off with 4 docking stations for up to 4 vehicles to charge simultaneously. And these will be DC fast chargers, so they should be able to charge up cars within roughly an hour. And then they can actually time it to automatically cycle through and then charge in the remaining EVs in the garage that need to be charged until they're all charged. And then over time, if there's an unacceptable lag time for cars in the garage to be charged, they would add additional charging docking stations in the garage. So not a system I've seen before, but I just wanted to comment on what was reported by the applicant and forwarded by Mr. Sekeli to me today.
Okay.
So in other words, I think I think 100% of the charging of the parking robotic pads will start off pre-wired, and in fact have charging cables on them right from the beginning.
That's helpful. I'm a little bit
Okay.
confused about the
Thank you.
difference between the charging, each tray having its own charging and these charging, what did you call them? Docks. But that's
Right.
a fine point. I don't want to take time with right now. I think it's something
Sure.
that we would look at very closely when the time is right.
Sure.
Okay, Sally. Are those the comments that you?
Yeah, that was my comments for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just thought I was looking at maybe when we get to talking about individual conditions, I think there might be a way of modifying the tree planting condition to something like trees shall be planted in a manner consistent with best practices for urban survivability to the satisfaction of the town, or something like that, so that your concerns about how they're planted are addressed. So I've gone through the conditions. I don't, I think the definition of unbundled parking, I think everyone seems to have a slightly different version of what that means. So I think some sort of unbundling is appropriate. I don't really have any other comments on the everyone else's comments. I think I'm following. I don't have any new comments. How's that? And then the last person is Kurt.
I think Kurt spoke.
Yeah, I
but-
did on the conditions. Yeah,
So
Okay, so how did I get out of order?
we
Who
did
has
go in
not-
order.
we didn't go in order. I think I just jumped in, so I'm at fault.
Oh, I'm sorry. So who did I miss? I Ching and Cheryl.
Sure, yeah. So,
Okay,
all
Guys, please go ahead, I Ching.
right, the conditions look familiar, and those that didn't seem reasonable to me. So I don't have anything much to add.
Okay, thank you. That was quick. Cheryl?
Yeah, I would say most of the conditions also hold up our in-town experts, engineering department, and others, and I rely on them for their expertise to guide this process. And I also just want to comment that both the architect and the landscape architect are probably some of the most talented and best in Massachusetts. So I think that we're in good hands with these, with some of our concerns documented here. I feel good about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, can
Um,
I ask a follow-up question?
As long as it's, sure.
Okay, I'll make it brief. Would the conditions also include that the project would comply with all of the accepted recommendations from advisory boards, town departments, and third-party peer reviews?
Those, the conditions are what we write in them. So if there is something from another board, I don't think we can give a blanket. If that condition is not in this list, then
Right, so
it's-
that's why I said the accepted recommendations. So what would be necessary then and Mina perhaps can help with this, is to say that subject to further confirmation of specific recommendations from those bodies that the planning board would determine need or acceptable and should be attended to, like the town engineering department wrote some really specific conditions, and we haven't heard from the Disability Access Commission yet because that happens farther down in the design development process, et cetera.
I think,
Yeah,
Brian,
I'll just
you
say
wanna
very
take a look
quickly,
at this?
I'll just say very quickly, specifically with engineering, all of engineering's comments are in there. It's referenced.
Have been addressed?
Yeah, it's in the document.
It's in the
reference.
document.
It's referenced in specifically, so all of those comments were
Right.
put in.
So
I mean-
VHB had a number of very specific things they wanted, and I saw Beal Engineering's response. I wasn't able to evaluate if their response said, yes, we'll do that, fine, fine, fine. And then Tool Design had a lot of really specific recommendations. And so then that would be a condition that we would review and accept and require those recommendations.
That was what I thought I was. So that's the list of conditions that's in your packet and that have just changed by 2. So what I did was put all of those conditions from Tool Design, the Ann Beha Architects, the engineering department. Those are all in the conditions that are in front of you now.
So then we would want to add that the Disability Access Commission be brought in for a peer review of the handicap accessibility features or the ADA features of the building to make sure that, and this happens in design development, and we're working before design development to make this, have this conversation. So I just want to make sure they're represented.
Right, so I think if it's a code issue, then that's a code issue. I think if the building is required to be ADA compliant, then that would be a building code issue. And so I think that would, I don't know that if it's required by code, I don't know that we need to put it in the conditions because they have to do it anyway.
For housing projects, DIAB, it is regulated by MAAB, a Massachusetts Accessibility Board. So I think we're covered on that, Sally.
Okay, that's great to know. I'm
Okay.
glad to know that. I just
So-
wanted to give them a chance to be part of the conversation, because I know that in the past, there's been occasions when the Disability Access Commission hasn't had a chance to weigh in at the right
we have
point in the process.
We have reached out to them. They have been, we did send out a request for their input on this project.
Okay, good.
So they have not been left out so far. We certainly, if this project continues, we would certainly continue to reach out to them.
Yeah, that's a really good thing. Great.
So at this point, Brian, I think we were at the point if you could bring back up our schedule. We are at 8:30 right now. I think there isn't really a time schedule, but we do have this to go through. We have some votes to take now. So at this point, we would vote for approval or denial of the special permit with or without prejudice. And Mina, if you could come in and let us know what those 2 words mean, with or without prejudice.
Yeah, so Diab, as you mentioned, your next step is voting on whether to approve or deny. And so whether you feel the criteria have been met as you've gone through them. Under Chapter 48, Section 16, a petition for a special permit, which it says maybe, actually, I'm sorry, it's not 16. It's essentially has to do with the filing, ability to file or not within a certain time period. And Brian, I don't know if there's anything particular in the bylaw. That's the only thing I just want to confirm with you that I don't remember.
There's nothing in our bylaw that would related to that. It's just relying on Mass General Law. At the 2 years, it has to be significantly different as determined by the planning board.
Exactly. So if it's denied with prejudice, it can't come back unless there's significant changes. If it's denied without prejudice, the bar is lower for how much it can change.
So for example, if we deny it and say you must come back with could we say you have to come back with one less floor? Would that be with or without prejudice?
So, Diab, I'm sorry. I just want to kind of restate this all because I don't think my answer was very clear before.
Okay.
The statute actually talks about the prejudice and without prejudice in a slightly different context. It's about the withdrawal of an application. And I don't think there's any suggestion here that we're asking the applicant to withdraw with prejudice or withdraw without prejudice. When we're talking about a decision, the 2-year bar that Brian mentions, if you vote to deny, that comes with a prejudice unless there is a vote of 4 members of the board out of 5, that the conditions are, there's been material changes. And so, yes, I would say dropping the height by 1 full story would be a material change that would meet that standard, but it's a little bit different. I guess I'm hesitating on the use of prejudice and without prejudice, because that has to do with the withdrawal of an application before action, if that makes sense.
Part of my brain says it makes sense. The other part is still confused.
So I'll try it sort of one last time, and I'm happy to take more questions. I apologize for that. Section 16 of Chapter 48 has sort of 2 pieces. One is the effect of a denial, and one is the effect of a denial with prejudice versus, a withdrawal with prejudice or without prejudice. The withdrawal piece is there are essentially, it is a check on the abuse of basically process one way or another, where an applicant can come before a special permit granting authority and say, okay, tell me everything you think about this. You tell them all the horrible things with it. And before you make a decision, I'm not saying that's true about this project, just so the applicant's clear, but that they say, you know what, I don't want you to make a decision, I withdraw, and they revise it and they come back. They've wasted a lot of everybody's time to do the hearing process, et cetera. That's where you make the and so you have to allow them to withdraw, and you have to allow them to withdraw with or without that's where you say, no, you got pretty deep into this, we're withdrawing with prejudice or withdrawing without prejudice. The denial doesn't have that terminology along with it. A denial simply, the wording in the statute is that if it's been unfavorably acted upon, you can't go back and act on it for another 2 years unless there's a material change.
Okay,
and that's the same standard as if a withdrawal with prejudice comes back before you, which is why the 2 may have been conflated for me and you as we talked about it.
Okay, so to be clear, we should strike the words with or without prejudice from what we will do tonight, because we are simply voting for approval or denial.
Correct, because once to put it bluntly, it's hard to deny without prejudice, unless the applicant is asking to withdraw, and then you can make that decision.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that clarified it for me. How about the rest of the board?
Not entirely, I'm sorry, but I don't understand. I don't know if I can articulate exactly what I don't understand, because I had wrapped my head around the whole model that the choice in front of the planning board was to approve with or without conditions, or to deny with or without prejudice. And if we say we've denied without prejudice, it would be because there was simply a pretty low bar checklist of things that the developer said, well, okay, let me fix that and I'll come back.
So
Right.
this is my mistake that I said that you could deny with or without prejudice. And Mina is saying you can't deny with or without prejudice. You deny or you approve. The withdrawal condition specifically has to do with, the Yeah, it only has to do with when an applicant is withdrawing, if there's with or without prejudice. So that's,
Okay, so I'm
that's all.
just good. I can learn. Thank you.
And Sally, I don't want to overstate the impact of this either, because that 2-year bar on reconsidering or considering this application at the same site, unless there's a material change that you've denied, unless there's a material change, it's effectively the same standard as when somebody withdraws with prejudice, because they have to come back and show that there was something different this time around that was material enough that's worth changing your opinions as a board. And so in a sense, just to be clear, if part of your denial is based, not yours, again, if part of the board's denial is based on a message that there is a version of this project we might approve, they don't have to wait a full 2 years if they make a material enough change.
Good, that's good to clarify, because I didn't want to do something that would delay this project by 2 years. That would not serve the needs of our town. Right. So that's good to understand that 2-year thing. I wasn't quite clear how it worked. You're saying that if they want to come back with something that's substantially the same, they can only do that 2 years later.
Exactly, right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, they can't come back with an identical project and say, let's try it again.
Right, I get it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on our voting options? Okay, then why don't we do this? So Brian, if you pop up our thing, let's go back and remember to strike the words with and without prejudice from that. So what we are doing right now is we are going to vote for approval or denial of the special permit, and that would be with approval with conditions, approval without conditions, or denial. So I think those are our 3 options in front of us. And if someone would like to make a motion to one of those 3 options.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Sally?
I would make a motion to deny this special permit application.
Okay, is there a second? And this board is not shy, but I will
So
do it.
Diab, I would have liked to make the motion in the context of my reasons for doing so.
I am actually unsure of, in our parliamentary procedure, whether you get to say that before there's a second. So Mina, since you're here, can we get your ruling on that? Because this is a nuance I am not familiar with.
So explaining the rationale for one's motion in favor or against is part of the debate, which happens after the second. So if there's a second, anybody can then, under your direction, Diab, can explain their reasons for or against the motion.
Okay, so we have to wait for a second, Sally, unfortunately.
All about Parliament.
I'm not a big fan of Robert's rules, but that's what we're bound by. So if there is, I do not believe there is a second for that motion. If that is, I'm giving everyone another few seconds. I don't believe that is a second. So is there another motion on the floor?
I would like to make a motion to approve
Is that with or without conditions?
with conditions, please.
Okay, so we have a motion from Cheryl to approve with conditions. Is there a second?
Second it.
Okay, I Ching seconds, and according to ruling, we can now go ahead and discuss the motion. Cheryl, did you want to discuss why you brought it up?
I think with the conditions that we've all reviewed and with the strength of all of the other partners in the review of this project, and those supporting it going forward. I think that this project deserves a special permit to build what is an appropriate project in the PUD in the downtown district.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go through the board in the order that I randomly chose at the beginning, just so if someone has, so the next person would be I Ching.
Oh, from what I understand about the zoning code and the PUD, it seems like this particular parcel was identified to have the potential for a high density of 3.0. And the specific reason why a permit granting authority would be able to do that is if they provided a diversity of housing. And that, talking with the housing partnership, I understand that they were not wanting to distribute unequally the number of affordable housing to one particular applicant, but to treat each applicant equally. And so I think that they have fulfilled that portion. And in regards to the scale, and I would reiterate what Kurt was talking about in the design review guidelines and the principles 7.3.171, that any part of new development should relate and harmonize with adjacent land use, planned or existing. And so from the PUD guidelines, and this has been a planned density, and this is the first. And I agree with Cheryl that the project is well considered. And I think somebody used my last week, I said uncomfortable. I think I meant uncomfortable in that we have had decades of no change, and then all of a sudden this thing. But I would say that it is not, that it is comfortable. Sorry, it's comfortable in the streetscape. It has well designed. It really suits that and responds to the site. So I think we should recognize good projects when they come before us.
Okay, thank you. And I forgot to mention that I really was hoping people would keep it under 3 minutes. And so far, Cheryl has been very gracious of keeping it very much under 3 minutes. So she's offered her time to others. And I Ching, you were under 3 as well. So
actually, Diab, can I share one image if that's possible? Am I out of order because I've already had my turn? Sorry about that.
Why don't you go ahead? You only took you had less than a minute. So why don't you, sure, we'll give you your time.
All right, so I did a little digging with images of Winchester. Does anyone see my screen right now?
No.
No. Oh, now it's popping up.
Yep.
Okay, there you go.
And I guess I was digging deep because I really believe in Haseen and Associates, and also the landscape designer and what they've put forward for, as I Ching was saying, something that our town has to take forward into the future and something that we voted on, our PUDs. I think that since the moment I moved into Winchester, what has become of the laundry building is the biggest heartbreak of downtown. And I think that if we look at the scale of the laundry building in its original skin, it's still a very large building. And I think that we can move forward into the future with something very elegant and well designed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next up is Sally, please.
So
And I will hold up my clock.
I was very happy to see Cheryl bring up the building, the laundry building in its original skin, because it's important for people to understand that the new building will be 5 times that size. And if that laundry building looks large to you in the context of our current building town, notwithstanding the fact that it has this ugly skin on it, this building, even with a beautiful skin, will be extremely large in our village. And the fact is that the planning board is not obligated to approve a 3.0 FAR. Notwithstanding what others on the planning board seem to have internalized, the fact is that it can do that if it provides a diversity of housing that addresses the needs of the Winchester community, but it also needs to meet the standards and criteria of our central business district zoning code. And I can use up more than my available time talking about why it doesn't do that. It doesn't harmonize with adjacent buildings. It's an isolated architectural statement that relates only to itself. It overshadows our iconic town center buildings and including our Winchester civic identity. Its mass will dominate the town. Its rooftop mechanicals will be highly in excess of anything around town right now, except possibly the Parkview. And I guess that's my time, Diab. I don't know what the counter means.
You get to 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Okay. It will be taller than the existing laundry building. I think almost 10 feet taller by the time you finish with all the rooftop mechanicals. It's got a massive footprint. It not only negatively impacts defining views of the mill pond, and when I say defining, I mean defining to the character of Winchester. But I'm glad to hear that it might allow improvements to the bikeway. I remain to see that. It doesn't incorporate the smaller broken down masses that the code requires for it. It is a monolithic structure. Its upper floors do not step back sufficiently to minimize their presence when viewed from the street. And to me, the top floor is jumbled and chaotic. It's not whatever is meant by a celebration of its union with the sky. I don't know what that means. The sloped roofs of the rest of the downtown are not at all reflected in the top floor of the building. One of the defining characteristics is not to have a negative impact on parking. And I just think that this building will do that very thing. And in addition, there are loading and unloading requirements that haven't been specified. And as they are specified, they have a negative impact on immediate neighbors.
Okay, thank you.
That's why I would say no.
Thank you. So I guess I'm up next. For me, the defining question, and I'll hold this up, oops, I better start. Defining question is, does this meet the PUD requirements? And I'll be honest that when this project came before this board last time, before it was actually submitted, I did not think it did. I think one of the problems is that the PUD requirements as what is a diversity of housing choices is broadly written and hard to put, it's on the face of it, it's hard to understand. I think the Housing Partnership Board has helped us come to that understanding, at least as our current understanding. And so to me, the fundamental question is, does it provide that diversity of housing opportunities? And I think with the providing of deeded affordable units, which was a 3-bedroom and a work study, I believe it does. I've already spoken about my understanding of the design. I also want to look, I'd like to look at things in the context of what's possible through the by right and what is possible through special permits. And so for instance, an open space special permit on this site would get you to 59 feet, which is quite tall, and it would be similar, actually, it's not too much off from the 63 feet, I think, that the current design has. Both of those using the same criteria. I think that there is a tension between what we see as the downtown today and what the downtown will be like in the future. I think that the zoning is looking forward to a time with higher density and larger buildings. I think that this is probably the largest building that will come into downtown. I know that a lot of people, we do read all of everyone's comments. A lot of people say that we aren't listening, but we are. We do listen. People are concerned about the scale. I think this is a larger building than we have now. There's no way around that. I think it's important to look at the height rather than the number of floors. For instance, the existing laundry building is almost the same height, but it has only 4 floors. So you have to look at the height. I think this will be a positive addition to the town. I think when I look across all of the positives and negatives, I have to come down on this having a greater positive impact than negative. And I think that's the criteria that we are looking at this board, is to weigh all of the different criteria before us. So I'm going to vote yes. Thank you. Kurt?
Sure. So I guess I think one thing that's important to point out is I think what my understanding is of our role here, which is really to interpret the zoning bylaws and try and weigh those relative to the proposal in front of us. I mean, I can tell you, I read all of the public comments, and I think for those who are on this call, they should know that their voices have been heard. And I think probably everyone on this board has read them and certainly takes them to heart. And I can say candidly, my personal view is I also wish this building was a little bit smaller. It feels a little big to me too. The flip side is I'm not being asked what my personal view is. I'm being asked how this weighs relative to the zoning bylaws, and the zoning bylaws were approved by the town. And so, I mean, some pieces of that, of the CBD zoning include, economic vitality and vibrancy, enhancing the commercial and residential tax base, improving, reinforcing livability, and aesthetics and qualities of downtown, promoting diverse housing alternatives. I mean, so there's like a lot of things beyond just design and scale and mass that are meant to factor into these decisions. And I think Diab's right to jump to the PUD question, because I think that really is the crux of this, which is a 3.0 FAR, has enough been done here to provide the housing diversity that is required to get that additional bonus FAR. I mean, the definition of a PUD is to encourage and facilitate the development of new mixed-use developments, especially those incorporating a substantial number of housing units within the CBD. This is a substantial number of housing units in the CBD. So in my mind, this absolutely is what the PUD was designed to do based on the words written on the page. And I think the housing diversity was weighed in on by by our committees in town. They feel like the diversity is there with, the affordable units, the fact they're spread over multiple unit types, a live work, a 3-bedroom. I guess I have a hard time just not seeing how this doesn't satisfy that. I would say, and I would implore upon the developer, since I know they're listening, to really consider offering more to the town on the affordability side, in particular those 120% units, offering those to the town at 80% should the town decide they want to do that, I think would be a great benefit and really help solidify what the project is offering to the town to justify the increased FAR. But at the end of the day, you can't get to a 3.0 FAR without building a building of the size that's been proposed. I mean, all the ideas of losing a floor, making it narrower, you lose the FAR. So, I mean, I think with that in mind, what the design team has done, in my mind, has gone sort of above and beyond to try and mitigate, incorporate design, good quality materials, try to be consistent with what's happening in the town. And our design consultant agreed. I guess the last thing I'll say is on the other issues of parking, they're actually exceeding the number of required parking spaces. They're providing underground parking, which is a huge cost. I think alternatives for this site will probably not have the same amount of parking spaces. So I don't see parking as being something that they haven't gone over and above to try and solve. And we have, a number of third-party experts who weighed in on parking, traffic, engineering, and I frankly have to defer to them and their recommendations. So that's it.
Diab, I have a question for Mina. Diab,
I forgot I was on mute. I was muted. Go ahead, please.
may I? Yes, okay, so Mina, my question to you is having to do with my statement earlier, which is that whether or not it has been determined by the Housing Partnership Board and other relevant parties that the mix of units in the building addresses the needs of the community, and therefore that they have earned the right to be awarded a building of 3.0 FAR on this site. I understood that that was in addition to also meeting all the terms, all the other standards and requirements of the Center Business District zoning. I didn't think that going to 3.0 meant that those other standards and criteria would be waived or moot or something. And I'm just hearing that that's essentially what we're deciding to do.
Well, Mina, are you there? I mean, I can personally respond to that on basis of that. I am not ignoring those.
Is
Diab,
Mina still here?
I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me. Can
Go ahead.
Now I can.
Yeah, I guess Sally, I'm gonna just rephrase the question as I'm hearing it, because I would let I think Diab weighed in to say he's not hearing, he may have his statement, and others may feel the same. But the way I'm hearing the question is, once the Housing Partnership Board says the diversity of housing aspect is, they recommend favorably that piece of it, are the other criteria waived? And the answer is no. You still have to weigh all of the criteria. But I think what you've done tonight is go through those criteria, or tonight and the prior meeting. I'm not sure if I understand the question fully, but that's.
Sally, you're muted.
No, my question is with regards to some of the language in the zoning bylaw that relates to the sections that we went through, including design. Well, we didn't go through design principles, but one of the standards of special permit criteria is that it be consistent with design review guidelines in section 7317. And so then we go to 7317 and we review the design principles. And the list that I read a moment ago is drawn from those design principles. And
Sorry, I have to interrupt. That site plan review criteria, sorry, that you're talking about site plan review. This is 942. We're in 942 right now.
So is that to say, Brian, that special permit criteria does not include the site plan review design guidelines?
I'll bring up
I'm just
942.
wondering if
So
special permits don't need to adhere to design guide principles and guidelines.
You're referencing a specific site plan review in the Center Business District. So right now we're under 942 doing the special permit criteria. What you're referencing is located in the section when we do site plan review.
Right, okay, so my mistake. So nowhere in the 8 criteria for a special permit does it say that design principles, elements of design review guidelines are to be considered?
No, number 4 says impacts on neighborhood character, including, and we went over this. So
well, we did, and I said that by my interpretation of compatible, it is not compatible, and specifically because I informed my judgment from the standards of design and elements of form that are elsewhere described in our document, whether they're referred to or not in this section.
but Sally,
compatibility is what I determined to be meeting those other standards and criteria. That, I guess you've answered my question. The answer is no.
The answer is that each one of us has looked over and come to our decision on number 4 based on our reading of the zoning bylaws.
Right.
And so
That's
we
exactly
have,
right.
I think I can only speak for myself and say that I have gone through all of those and I have come to a different decision than you, Sally.
I see
It
that,
isn't to
yes.
say that I am ignoring them. It's that my decision as to whether it complies with those is different.
No, and you've pointed out something very helpful to me, which is that criterias 1 through 8 do not substantively incorporate
I think
design
so. I think
principles,
number
elements
4
of design, et cetera. It
I-
does
I
not
would-
substantively incorporate. So that's the answer.
No, I would disagree, Sally, in that I think number 4 does substantially incorporate it. I think number 4 covers pretty much the design.
To the extent to which forms and materials are compatible with scale and character. I think that there's been a lot of comment tonight and from our community that they are not compatible with the prevailing scale and character. And to the extent to which,
So
yeah,
Sally,
that's the primary one right there, 4A.
right. So all I'm pointing out, Sally, is that special permit does take into account design considerations because of number 4.
Right, 4A specifically.
And the fact is that I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I have looked at those design criteria. And in my opinion, they are met. So it's not to say that they have not been taken into account.
Okay, so good. I'm glad to hear that. And so then in the opinion of each member of the board, it will be their purpose to decide if they've been met.
And we had this discussion, yes.
Right, we did.
As
Okay,
everyone, we discussed number 4 last week, everyone presented their opinion. And as you pointed out, we're now ready to vote.
yeah, we did come to number 4 at the very end of the last meeting. And I think we were rushed, but I understand that everybody has had a chance to weigh in on that issue. Thank you.
Okay. So I think it now comes to a vote of the board. So all those in favor, the motion is to approve with the conditions that were laid out this evening. And so all those in favor, please say aye, and and those opposed say nay, and I will go through everyone. And so you can say your vote. I Ching,
Aye.
Cheryl,
Aye.
Sally.
You're
You're muted.
Nay.
Sally. Dieb says aye. Kurt?
Aye.
Okay, thank you all very much. At this point, I would, Brian, if you could please put up our schedule of events for the evening. We are running later than I'd hoped. Right now we do. So I would like for us to take a short break. We do need to get through all of this tonight. I think this will be our last meeting prior to the election. And for those who do not know, there is a legal requirement that those who vote on this miss no more than one public hearing on the project. And since we have elections coming up and there are 3 members of the board who may not be here next week or the next time, we need to do this or else we have to start this all over. So why don't we vote on waivers? And Brian, if you would explain what the waivers are and then what they explain their purpose and then what they are.
Sure. So as part of the application for the special permit, they were requesting waivers based upon what was allowed in the zoning. So each of these basically reflect what's in the plans that were essentially just approved with conditions. But each of these waivers do need to be officially voted on by the board. This is essentially what the application is all about. So each of these would need a first and a second, just like, we're still under Robert's rules. So someone would need to make these motions in order to grant or deny these waivers.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll start off. Would someone please make a motion to waive the height of the project to 62 feet to the roof?
So moved.
And who was that? I missed
Cheryl.
it. Okay, thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please. I Ching,
Aye.
Cheryl,
Aye.
Sally?
You're
Sally.
on mute, Sally.
You're muted, Sally.
No,
Diab is aye. Kurt?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The second waiver, would someone please make a motion to waive the maximum floor area ratio to 2.99?
So moved.
Sorry. I second that.
Okay, roll call vote, please. I Ching,
Aye.
Cheryl,
Aye.
Sally?
no,
Diab is aye. Kurt?
Aye.
The third waiver, someone please make a motion to waive the front setback to 2 feet on Mount Vernon and 10 feet on Converse Place at the ground floor. And that the floors 2 and 3, the projecting bay windows are set back by 4 feet.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. I Ching,
Aye.
Cheryl,
Aye.
Sally?
abstain.
Okay, Diab says aye. Kurt?
Aye.
Okay, I believe those are our waivers. I would like to call for a very short break at the moment. If everyone would like to take, let's say 3 minutes to do whatever you need to do for 3 minutes, and we will be back at 9:13 apparently. 9:12, sorry, can't count. Thank you.
Hey, Dennis, oh, fuck.
Okay. Um, So I'll just ask if all the members turn their video on so that I know you're present and we can continue. Okay, so we're still waiting on Sally and Cheryl. Cheryl's mic is on, but I
I'm
don't know.
here.
Oh, okay, you're here. Then we're just waiting on Sally.
Yeah.
And Mina, are you there?
I am, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So why don't we, as soon as Sally comes online, we can start with the next section, which is an explanation by Mina on what approval or an endorsement or withholding endorsement for a site plan review, how that affects the project. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hold up the meeting.
no, not a problem. So I believe we were all here. Cheryl, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Excellent.
sorry,
Okay. No
I'm
problem. Just
definitely here.
Mina, if you would please go ahead.
Thank you, Diab. So site plan review in the CBD in particular goes through a number of criteria as well that are enumerated in the bylaw. The purpose of site plan review for projects that are that have a special permit it's done concurrently, and the purpose of site plan review is not to approve or deny, but rather to, again, see if the criteria are met with those conditions, and essentially to try to improve the plan to the, if necessary, or to make sure those things have been considered. Withholding endorsement effectively says these things have not been adequately considered by the applicant. And may require the applicant to come back for basically further deliberation on that.
Okay, so the special permit has been approved. Is there a change in moving forward on this project if the site plan review is withheld? Do they have to resolve that first before they proceed with other parts of the project?
So, Diab, the reason I'm hesitating is typically not actually. Site plan review is not an approval process so much as what it's called. It's a review process. So that if there's adequate permitting, it has gone through that process at that point. It is very often the case that if you're holding site plan review and you have adequate basis for it, that may sort of, the criteria are often intermeshed, as you can tell here. And so there may be a basis for someone to say, well, why one but not the other, or on what basis? And that may cause either the applicant or an abutter to make that argument. That's really where that appeal comes in. But it's not intended to be a purpose of an opportunity for denial of a project once it's already been approved for a special.
Okay. Are there any questions of the board for town council? Thank you, Mina. If there are no questions, then why don't we move to site plan review? And some of these criteria I think are very similar to the criteria which we have reviewed for the special permit. So Brian, if you could pop those up.
Yep, just a second.
So I believe my understanding of site plan review is that we can make reasonable conditions in order to, so that we could come to an approval. So we could say, you can do some, yeah. So they have to be reasonably, we have to determine that reasonably adequate provisions have been made. And I believe we can also put reasonable conditions on the applicant. So I believe we have covered a number of these issues. We have, I don't know, I think the biggest one will be number 10. I know there's definitely not all the board feels the same way about number 10 or number 11. I would like to, because we've discussed these pretty much as part of the special permit, I don't want to have the board go and have that same sort of discussion unless they feel that it is really necessary. So what I'd like to do is simply say, why don't I go around the board and give everyone a couple of minutes to discuss the ones that they are particularly concerned about, or where they think some remediation is possible or required, and I will set an alarm for, I will set it for 2 minutes.
Can you go backwards?
In what sense?
From the last person to.
Oh, you would like more time. Is that what you're saying?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so I will try to, I'm trying to change my my timer here, which is pretty silly. It's not a great timer, but why don't we set it at 2 minutes? And Kurt, you are, we're going backwards now. So Kurt, you're up first.
So just to be clear, Deb, you want me to comment on all 12 of these? Or
Yeah, because I think we've covered most of them. So if there's something in particular that is different from what you've commented before on the site, on the special permit.
So I think on the traffic circulation and access, I'll just try and pick them up quickly. I mean, I think we have some a condition in there that involves the select board and the town weighing in particular on the circulation on Commerce Place and how to address 3 parking spots in the loading zone. And so I think that, in my mind, is still an open item and a condition that does still need to be addressed. I think it's a valid concern that we talked about. And I think, the removal of parking spaces in that loading zone and whatnot, it's a little bit out of our, I think it is out of our purview. So, I mean, I think that is a condition that still needs to be satisfied. On number 2, I have no comments on pedestrian safety and access, or no new comments, I should say. Same on emergency vehicle access. Same on stormwater drainage. Again, I defer to our third-party expert reports on some of these topics where I clearly am not an expert and they are. Same for number 5. Defer to our town engineer and his views on what's required and what conditions are necessary to be, to mitigate any issues with the site. 6, screening. Again, I think we talked a little bit about screening at the rooftop, and then also talked about making sure we're preserving trees and have an adequate tree plan in place and whatnot to ensure preservation of the mill pond bank. And I think that's addressed in our conditions previously. 7, protection and preservation of existing historic structures, vistas, and natural features. No new comments on that one. We got our input from the Historic Commission with their review on that, and they recommended favorable action here. So I think we've already addressed that. I have no comments or no new comments on 8, signage and exterior lighting. On 9, avoidance or mitigation of visual impact. Again, no new comments there. On 10, which is the consistency with character and scale of surrounding buildings, CBD areas, and neighborhoods. I think this is all tied together with the comments that I shared of my own view during the special permit conversation. I think it's challenging. I think that this both 10 and 11 are the big challenges for us. But I think when I at least read the zoning bylaws and interpret what was intended with the PUD for this part of town, and then what the developer did with that, and the feedback we got from our design consultants and whatnot, and you think about this project in the context of the existing town and then also the future vision for the town. So again, both planned and existing. I feel as though, they've done, as good a job as they possibly could while trying to preserve the benefits that they are getting as part of a PUD where they're providing diversity of housing, which, the Housing Partnership Board weighed in on. I would just repeat, my, assuming it's not inappropriate, my request to the developer to really consider, providing some additional affordability on some of these units, for the betterment of the town. I think people would appreciate the project more if they did. So on 11, I think kind of ditto similar comments, and then 12, no new comments.
Okay, thank you. According to the rules, we're going backwards, so I'm next. I'm going to start the clock here. So I don't have, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think are all our consultants and town engineer, and we have a condition from the public safety on number 3. I think we're good on those. For number 6, screening, I want to make sure that we do get good screening on the mechanicals on the top. I think that there is a good team who understands that. So I think that they have done a good job, and I believe we will continue to work well with them. Protection, preservation of vistas and natural features. So there is a plus and minus on that. Certainly some of the views from Mount Vernon will be occluded by this building. On the other hand, by removing the existing laundry building and opening up that space next to the mill pond, we are creating new vistas. So it's not an existing vista, but it is creating a new one. I think that given what's possible between what's allowed by right in this building, as I mentioned before, I think there's nothing specific about this project which makes it especially bad, which is different than what's allowed by right. Signage and exterior lighting, the dark sky initiative language is very appealing to me as an astronomer. I think that 10 and 11 are the big ones. I've spoken on how I feel about those. And I believe that this design will continue to be refined over the next many months. I think that we will I think there's room for improvement, and I think there will be improvement. So I believe that we're moving in the right direction. No, I'm sorry, signage and exterior lighting and avoidance or mitigation of acoustical lighting impact are very similar, so I'll stay with that. And that's it. I'm done. Next is Sally.
Thank you, Diab. I think that Tool Design's report did a really good job of addressing the concerns around traffic circulation and access, pedestrian safety and access. And I was happy to see that, I guess, our public safety department, I think it was the fire department, has requested an additional provision for emergency access all the way around the building. That was the question that I had. I didn't quite see how a fire truck needing to access the east or the south sides of the building would do so. So I'm happy to see that's been built into the conditions. I think stormwater drainage has been built into the conditions. I don't know about number 5 actually, but I defer to others. And I think that screening of the building, well, it can't be screened, but the screening of the rooftop features certainly can be, given the views. We talked about that. I don't think the building is preserving existing vistas, although I acknowledge Diab's point that by removing the laundry building, we create an additional vista. I don't know that that's a sufficiently mitigating fact, but it appears to be something. And then the number 9, it doesn't seem an issue. And you know how I feel about numbers 10 and 11. I'm grateful that the dark sky guidelines are being incorporated into this building, and it's something that I hope that we incorporate into all future construction in the town. It will make a big difference to our ability to see the stars. And those are my comments on this, particularly 10 and 11. I do not think that reasonably adequate provisions have been made by the applicant for the consistency with character and scale of buildings, CBD area neighborhoods, and design review guidelines.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl.
Okay. I'm back. I'd like to share my screen. Whoop. All right, hold on. I have to say that going after everybody is kind of like saying the same thing over and over again. So I'm just going to say that we've covered all of this, and I have been looking at our town and how beautiful it is. And as you can see, there are changes that are going to happen in the future, but there are things that we will continue to preserve and we will remember as what we cherish. We're not tearing down here except for a crazy building. There are lots of, ooh, I'm like going at great speed here, sorry. It's not following. At one time, the town didn't have a train going through it. And some of the buildings have survived and some have burned. A lot has changed. Believe it or not, this is what the bakery once looked like. And Bookends was once covered with an arcade of columns. But we've continued to grow and we've continued to create a downtown with trees and green. And we've also adapted to large trains going through, and we've beautified our town and maintained historic buildings. And it's right now time to take down a historic building that is not serving us. And I want to just go back and reiterate what Kurt read and others have as well, that the purpose of the planned PUD development or the planned unit development is to encourage and facilitate the development of new mixed-use developments, especially those incorporating a substantial number of housing units within the CBD. I think that we can bring this building into our village and have it be loved and a part of what our daily lives are, and bring new people into downtown who want to access a train, who can help solve the housing crisis for Massachusetts and for the US. I think there's just so much that's so good about this building, including the design. And I think that the site plan review has been covered in all of our discussions earlier. So I just wanted to share images to reinforce that we have a very positive future with this building.
Okay, thank you. I Ching, did you get enough time?
Wow. Yeah, I don't want to ruin that. I follow that one. I wish I could give my time to you, Cheryl. But I think that the number, Brian, can I see the list again? I just want to focus a little bit more on, I think 6 and 7, protection and preservation of existing historic structures, vistas, and natural features. And I don't want to minimize the bigness of the structure and how it does obstruct views of things that we're used to seeing, like town hall from certain angles, and the waterway and the church towers. But I do want to acknowledge that this project actually adds to that enjoyment in certain parts where it's placemaking, in places that haven't been enjoyed by the town, and definitely having us connect parts of town, and making that bikeway a little more used. And I think that is something that I hadn't really focused on, but I really appreciate is that part. And 11, 10, those things, again, yes, very difficult. And it's hard to change and feel like I feel sort of new to town also, even though this is probably my 6th year, and it's definitely a different space than a lot of places around us, for good reasons. But I also think that the change has been decided by town, 7 years ago. And I think that this project in particular takes those directions and treats the town with respect, brings the things that we have wanted to come to it. And I think the pedestrian experience especially will be a very positive feature. So.
Okay, thank you. I think at this point then we are ready for a vote. Are there any conditions that people would like to put as part of the site plan review? One of the things that I want to put in, I believe it goes in here, I'm not sure, is that I would like to see a design wall. I think that's what it's called. Brian, if you could provide me the language.
There's a condition. There was a condition already.
Okay, then I apologize.
Sorry, it's for a test wall to be
wall. Okay.
to be reviewed and approved by the planning board.
Okay, so that's already a condition. My apologies. It's getting late. I think I remember who I am. Any conditions from the board? I do not see anybody jumping up and down for conditions, so I guess we can.
Diab, I was going to ask, just for a point of clarity, if a condition has been covered off in the special permit approval, there's no reason to duplicate it here, presumably, right?
That's correct.
Once it's covered there, we're good. Okay.
I think I'm on solid ground saying that. Mina hasn't popped up and said I was wrong, so I'll take that.
You're not wrong, Diab. No, if the condition's in there, it'll be binding on the applicant in either case.
And I should note that a lot of people, we've gotten lots of letters asking about a number of things, in particular the relationship of our decisions with regard to those of the Concom, and those are separate conditions. If the Concom requires changes to the project in order to meet their rules, then this project will have to come back before this board if those are significant changes. So there is, we are separate, but we will respond. We will react to whatever Concom provides. So that's just, I forgot to mention that earlier. My apologies. So I think that I would welcome a motion to we have our choice to endorse, withhold, or endorse with conditions. Those are our three choices. Hearing no conditions, I guess we're either endorse or withhold. Is there a motion for either?
Diab, didn't you have a condition?
Brian pointed out that that was already covered by the original
Oh,
set of
sorry.
conditions. So,
Okay, sorry.
yeah. So, is there a motion?
I move that we endorse the site. No, you don't endorse a review. You,
Endorse the plan, I believe.
okay? I move we endorse the plan.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Yeah. Diep, can I just make a friendly amendment? I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
want to avoid
Can't
any,
make an amendment.
well, not an amendment, but you know what I mean.
He's a lawyer. He can do what he wants.
Well, far from it. But I think in this case, where site plan review it's a little bit different than a site plan review in the sort of normal subdivision case. I think I would say that what you're doing is voting to
Maybe we close the review.
essentially close the review and find that the conditions, the requirements of site plan review have been met. And so I would just
Okay.
want to phrase the motion in that way.
Okay, close review and find that site plan conditions have been met. Okay, so I guess technically we need to withdraw that motion. So who made the motion? I forget.
I withdraw my motion to
Okay.
Whatever.
And so now the motion before us is, or at least one of the motions is to close the review and find that site plan conditions have been met. Will someone move that?
So moved.
Cheryl will move. Is there a second?
Good.
Okay, I Ching seconds. So let's go in reverse order again. Kurt?
Aye.
Dieb says aye. Sally?
No.
Okay. Cheryl?
Aye.
And I Ching.
Aye.
Okay, thank you all very much. Brian, can you pop up our list of things to do? Did we get to the end? We did get to the end of this meeting. We still have some budget to talk about, but
No, there's still one thing. So
Okay,
typically
so
with
number
with any of these decisions, number 10 is a standard condition that is recommended by legal.
okay, so I would welcome a motion to vote that the chair, planner, and legal counsel finalize the decision according to the to finalize the decision, sorry.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Same order. Kurt?
Aye.
Dieb says aye. Sally?
I abstain.
Okay. Cheryl?
Aye.
And I Ching.
Aye.
Okay, thank you all very much. I recognize that this decision leaves many people in our community disappointed. Some are, I'm sure, very upset. I understand that. I think that this is change. It's a change that a lot of people may feel is inappropriate. A lot of people, I believe, feel it is appropriate. I think that I again ask that everyone respect the time and effort that this board has put into this, and that we are doing this, I think, with the best of intentions for the town. So I thank you all for coming along with us on this journey. It is not over. There will be continued work on this project. There will be continued changes to design. It is still going to go through a significant review by various boards, because we all want this to be the best project it can possibly be. I believe we have to vote to close this hearing for the first time since September. I don't even want to count the number of meetings we've had. I want to thank the board for being able to be, I don't know of anyone who has missed one of these hearings. So it's really remarkable the number of hearings we've had. And I really appreciate the effort the board has made in being able to meet at all times. So is there a motion to close the hearing on 10 Converse?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Let's go for I Ching,
Aye.
Cheryl,
Aye.
Sally,
I,
Diab says aye, and Kurt.
Aye.
Okay, thank you all very much. I really appreciate everyone from the community joining with us this evening. This was, again, a very long and difficult process, and that's what it was. The board, I hope the board can bear with us for a few more minutes. We do have budget concerns to talk about, and we can jump to those very quickly. We have, Brian, do you want to lead off, or you want me to just jump in?
Go for it. I didn't know where you wanted to start, to be honest.
Okay, so let me start.
I'll
So
take your lead. Yeah.
we currently have, and we currently have $45,000 in consulting, and this is pure 45,000, which is not connected to Holton Street. And I apologize. In the past, I said that 15K of it was, but it's not. So we are limited in the spending of this money is that we can only, for instance, if we start a North Main Street study, we can only pay up for work completed up until the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th. So Brian has a concern that we will not get, say, $45,000 worth of work out of our consultants for North Main Street by June 30th. That's just not physically possible. There just isn't enough time to do that much work. But we do have a parallel project on Holton Street, which we could start. And in order to get that going using this money, I mean, if we don't use the 45,000, then it goes away. And so we will have to, we will lose that amount. And to be honest, if we want to show to the town that we deserve to have this much money because of the projects that we have said we're going to do, we do have to start those projects. So we have to make a decision soon. I believe there'll be a decision made on a consultant for North Main Street, probably by our next meeting. I don't know the exact date anymore, but we have three organizations that are up. And then the question is, what do we do with Holton Street? Can we get something quickly done with Holton Street? And I think Holton Street will probably go through two phases, like we're seeing with North Main Street, where we have an initial our current existing conditions assessment, and then a further refining of that. So the question is, does the board want to go to MAPC for that initial conditions assessment like we did with North Main Street? In that case, we can get started very quickly on that, provided they can start quickly. I can't speak for them. But that would allow us to start this project.
So one very quick thing that I'll say just on timing. So these firms have been kind of waiting in the wing for North Main Street. They're not aware of any specific meeting that they're supposed to come to because we haven't really made a decision exactly on what meeting that would be.
right.
So the election's on the 19th. That leaves somebody really one or 2 days to potentially get sworn in to become a voting member of the planning board. I'm wondering if, and this is totally the board's decision, but maybe we just take next week off and go to the 29th, and that gives me time to kind of organize these consultants to hopefully be able to come even for 10 minutes or so on the 29th. That at least gives the whole new board to be reconstituted. So, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't meet on the 22nd, but I think that what I'm really saying is that I think we should talk about those consultants or try to get them, at least give them a fair shot of being able to come on the 29th. instead of the 22nd. So that was just some timing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that would be North Main Street. And so the question is, I think we're going ahead with that regardless. I think we've all decided that's the course. And so the question is, do we want to proceed with Holton? And again, the quickest way forward would be for us to go to MAPC for the initial condition study. If they, I don't know what their schedule's like.
So, Diab, I have a question about the use it or lose it premise, because that's a lot of what's sort of like underlying our deliberation right now on this question. And I thought that if it was encumbered, that is committed in the current fiscal year, it doesn't need to be expended. It can be put into an encumbered account.
So that's what Diab had also thought, but that is not true. So money that's in this fiscal year has to be for work that's done in this fiscal year.
Well, given that, I think it's imperative that we move forward with Holton and bring in the earliest available, credible, reliable consultant to do a site analysis, like you said. Because if we can't encumber it and keep it in reserve for the continuation of the North Main Street project, then we would want to use that money for one of our other projects that's been waiting in the wings, and that would be the one you suggested, Diab.
That's the only one we've got at the moment.
It's the only one we got. But I mean, essentially, I guess there'd be a vote to potentially green light at least. I don't even know. It's really, we haven't really talked about that process. It's really just we know the only one that we can do very quickly, meaning using this money and with a responsible consultant, is through MAPC. But that's not guaranteed at all that we're going to get that. I mean, this is towards the end of the fiscal year. Their work is, I talk with MAPC often for a number of reasons. They are very busy right now. They're busier now than they've ever been, basically due to backlog of all of just in general, but they're busting is the point. And the end of the fiscal year is kind of the worst time to be starting to add, which means in the next 3.5 months, that's what we have, 3.5 months, to start to add new projects. So if we are going to be serious about this, we kind of need to decide immediately, are we going to move forward with something, are we going to move forward with MAPC or something else? That decision should be made. Unfortunately, that's kind of where we are.
And when you say something else, what does that mean? I'm sorry.
Meaning another process where we're like what we're doing for North Main, where we've gotten 3 quotes. We're going to have them try to come in for interviews. So it's a question, do we want to do the same thing again also for Holton, or do we want to contract with MAPC? We had decided in the last one, we decided that we'd wanted to do this different process. So now this new question is whether we want to engage MAPC for Holton Street.
Well, it seems to me if they're available, that's the quickest way for us to take advantage of the funding that we have. Is that correct?
Right, and
The first question is, are they available?
Right, let's assume they're available. If they're not
assuming
available,
that
it
they're
doesn't matter.
available.
It doesn't matter, right? So let's assume they're available.
Well,
Would you want them to do
I
this
would,
for
I
phase
would
one?
say if they're available, let's go ahead. We got a quality product out of them last time. And so I think that would be my vote.
And it would be a site analysis, like a whole.
Phase one was really an existing conditions analysis, and then starting with some. I could certainly bring it up, but it was starting with a visioning. But really, to start that visioning, you really need to do that existing conditions analysis. So it seems like at the minimum, we would be able to get an existing conditions analysis, and then the start or a framework of how, if it's not them, maybe the planning board could have. Additional public engagement. So the idea is that try to get as much out of the project over the next 3.5 months as we possibly can, and then make a decision on the direction, because that Holton's going to be a multiple phase, multi-year, multi-phase project. $15,000 is not going to transform Holton Street, right? So the idea is that there's plenty of work to be done. And now we have some more time to do it over the next 3.5 months.
So I think the first step is to just see if they're available, right? I mean, if we went the other route, I mean, it was so hard to get those consultants to find the consultants even for Main Street.
I mean, if that has to be the will of the majority of the board for me to kind of move that, so that.
Okay, I would say yes to that too, Ally and Dia.
So let's just do a straw vote. Everybody who wants to go forward, just raise your hand.
So
Actually, we
I'm
can't.
sorry, I gotta understand what we're talking. Are we going forward with reaching out to MAPC to see if they're available to help us with Holton Street before the end of the fiscal year?
No, I think the question is really, should we be pursuing MAPC or should we be pursuing a 3-quote interview process?
I think it's if they're available, we would pursue them, right? I mean, we would use them. Because it's the quickest way.
Not just that it's the quickest way. I mean, we're asking them to do exactly what they do.
So let me try to get us a decision tree going here. Okay. So first question is, will the board, if MAPC is available, does the board want to use them to do Holton Street? Okay.
Yes.
And so I'm going to go around so that, because I don't think Nancy can record hand waves. So let's just say I Ching.
Aye.
Sally.
Yes.
Kurt.
Aye.
Cheryl.
Aye.
And Dieb says aye. Okay, Brian, is that enough direction for you?
Yeah, and then basically if they're not available, I can go through scheduling through email with the board until we talk again. Like that's something that would be allowed over email in terms of scheduling interviews and that type of thing. That if they're not available, it's very easy. We can either put out an RFP, which we clearly don't have time for, or we get 3 quotes for a scope of the project that I can put together that's very similar to the North Main Street one, but should be a little bit smaller because of the scope.
And we
Meaning a
don't have
smaller
10
area.
converse on our plate every single meeting, so we will have more time to discuss this.
Yeah. Okay, so that definitely gives enough direction. It's 10 o'clock. I think the only thing that we do have to decide tonight, and it's not a big one at all, is when are we going to meet again? So are we going to meet on the 22nd or on the 29th? I think you can make a case for both. I think there's a possibility that any new members of the planning board might not even be able to sit on the 22nd anyway. Not that that matters. Maybe there's just no deliberations or votes or anything like that. But we are the only agenda item at the moment that I can think of, other than what we talked about tonight, is there's 3 special permits.
What's the due date for those?
Oh geez, yeah, we don't have a choice. Oh no, they're the 31st actually. So technically we don't have to meet on the 22nd. We technically could meet on the 29th because those ZBA petitions are it would have to be a very quick turnaround for the votes, but Nancy can help us with that, and can help Sally and I out with that. So the idea is that you're not boxed in with the 22nd. It's possible you don't have to meet on the 22nd is all I'm saying.
Okay, so
in the scenario that the new planning board members are, there's going to be at least one, are looking forward to getting, their feet on the ground and so on. We could decide to meet both Tuesdays if the other members of the board who will be here after the election, or at least expect to be here, like, because Cheryl knows she's stepped down, expect to be here after the election, would be able to do both Tuesdays. And the reason that I would say that is because Tuesday the 22nd is an opportunity for us to not only just get our group oriented, but also to begin to talk about what are the goals and aspirations and priorities for the 22-23 year, and at least just put them on the table. And that would be a very orienting thing to do, not only for the new member, but for all of us, just to get our heads back to what we were thinking about before we got absorbed with 10 Converse.
Yeah, that's there are some perfunctory things that has to be done at that first meeting. One of them being, like just one of them being scheduling, and whether or not, the idea of going remote, hybrid, or in person, those types of things. There's also going to be a reorganization of the board, meaning that there will be potentially a new chair meeting, or a new vote. Right, there'll have to be a vote for the chair and vice chair, which happens annually after the election. So these are all things that could happen on the 22nd, for sure. But there's a lot of perfunctory things before getting into goals and aspirations. That would probably not be the first or the second meeting.
So the 22nd could be a short meeting, but it would get us ahead of the game for the 29th.
I think that's a reason. I think that's a good idea.
So I don't know if I will be available on the 29th. I will be traveling, so I'm not sure if that's a travel day or a rest day. But I can make the 22nd if I'm still on the board.
Then let's just continue with this. We'll do a 7 o'clock on the 22nd, and we'll talk about agenda after that. I mean,
then we need to take a break at some point because we've been meeting every week.
Also, before we leave, Cheryl.
Yeah, sure.
Hello, goodbye.
Cheryl.
Hello, goodbye.
Adios, guys. Yeah, been a ride. It's been fun.
So we'll all go to your house and Telluride, or wherever it might be.
I wish. Telluride. Whoa.
Not there.
No.
Well, yeah, no. I guess Kurt too. We'll just go be ski bunnies.
I'm in. Yeah, I was saying.
We're there. We're there. Yeah.
Man, I have to tell you though, if you haven't skied in a while, skiing out here creates some real sore muscles. I'm a sufferer right now.
Good sore.
Well,
yeah, it's all
But
good.
Brian said that you would have a home base here. You would have a base here. No?
I still have a house in Winchester. Yeah.
Well, for like the next couple weeks.
Yep. Just
No.
enough to get me through planning board. Woohoo!
Well, thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, this
You
is
will
a
be
great
missed.
group.
You will be missed. And good luck out there in sunny white Colorado, snowy white, I should say Colorado. I meant the snow.
It's the one thing I never realized is it's always blue sky out here. It's amazing. Really is sunny. 300.
How does it snow? It's always blue.
That's up in the mountains.
yeah.
No, it like one day it'll snow and 6 days it's sunny. So
It's
just bizarre.
Colorado. That area of Denver or of Colorado has the same amount of sunny days as Southern California.
Oh, wow.
but we get snow, so
It's a weird thing. Yeah.
better.
No, it's kind of strange.
Just like Winchester.
Yeah.
6 sunny days after.
Anyway, you guys, good luck. I hope everything keeps sailing with Converse and with all the center business district. It's a challenge, but it's a good center. It'll thrive. And it's funny to leave a place when we're at the end of COVID. You guys are seeing it come back to life, right? I hope.
There are people coming back downtown.
Yeah.
Yep. Not,
Yeah.
I mean, from places I wouldn't have expected, but it's kind of funny standing out there holding a sign and asking people if they are Winchester residents, and they're from like all over the place. And I'm like, what are you doing in Winchester? Like,
Oh, really?
yeah. So I think we really need to stand out there and corral everyone in downtown and say, why are you here? What is it that's drawing you here? So it's,
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting.
They're looking for affordable apartments.
Oh, they went to Cafe Nero. Is what they were doing.
And not the best slogan of or campaign of why are you here? What
Yeah.
are you doing here? Like, why are you?
Can you vote?
Okie dokie.
Anywho,
Luck on that.
I can't make a motion to adjourn, but I would second and third all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
So
go. Let's
I
go.
will ask for someone to move that we adjourn.
I'm going to move that we adjourn this meeting
Okay.
because I'm adjourning forever.
Yes. And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. We'll get to you last, Cheryl. Sally?
Please.
Did you say Sally? I say aye.
Okay, I Ching,
Aye.
Kurt, I say aye as well, and Cheryl.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Nancy Polcari, our recording
Thank you,
secretary.
Nancy.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Brian, town planner. Thank you to WinCam for recording us. Thank you to everyone who has been visiting us. I hope we see you in the future.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
Thank you, Cheryl.
We will see you
Thanks,
around.
planning board. Bye-bye.
Glad to see you go.